Today I'm going to be talking to you about Wellness Check and the Treatment Outcome Package that you can both use to measure and improve well-being for kids and child welfare. So before we get started, just a few key definitions. The Treatment Outcome Package, or the TOP, is an assessment tool that measures psychological and emotional well-being. Wellness Check is the website where TOP is administered by you, the worker, and Outcome Referrals, or ORI, is the company that created TOP, and we provide technical and customer support. So Outcome Referrals uses patented methods of assessment based on decades of research in behavioral health and child welfare. The Treatment Outcome Package, or the TOP, focuses on 12 behavioral health outcomes using statistically validated questions. So for the child version of the TOP, there are 48 questions. For the adolescent version, there are 58. The questions are grouped into strengths, symptoms, and functional categories. And I will note that this is not meant to be used as a diagnosis per the DSM-5, but rather just a guide for further investigation and to guide your work with a client. Our database includes over 1.2 million individuals, and we are the world's largest database of health, trauma, and well-being outcomes. So the TOP is used all over the country in 39 states, and it was developed by Dr. David Kraus. He is a child clinical psychologist. He ran an inpatient child psychiatric unit, and his clinical expertise is in multi-generational trauma and abuse and neglect. So the TOP is comprised of 3 different forms. There's the Consumer Registration Form, or the CR. This is the form that is filled out initially upon registering a client. It collects demographic data about each client. It's completed the very first time and then updated if there are any changes. And it has to be completed prior to inviting raters to take the TOP for the child. And I'll go over all of this in more detail later. I'll show you the actual forms and how they fit into Wellness Check. The next form is the Case Mix form. This collects information about life stressors and medical conditions, as well as prescription medications taken, and then any other kind of relevant life history information. It's completed by the worker at intake and then updated every 90 days because, as we know, life stressors certainly can change, especially for a child in care. Information is gathered about life experiences, as I said, and most importantly, it measures the level of stress that a child is experiencing based on these life experiences. And then finally, the clinical scales, or the CS. This I like to call the heart of the TOP. It's the form that you, the worker, and all raters will complete most often. It's written at a 5th grade reading level. It takes about an average of 10 minutes to complete. And like I said, there are 2 versions. There's the child version and the adolescent version. And the CS can be administered in 3 ways, either through email, by printing out a PDF and having a rater fill it out by hand and then faxing it back, or by taking now, which literally brings it up onto the screen that you're looking at to take the TOP. The clinical scales are usually filled out about every 30 days or 60 days. It really depends on your agency's protocol. So this page shows the child and adolescent domains. So you can see on the left, the child TOP includes domains of lack of assertiveness, incontinence, lack of resiliency, separation anxiety, and eating issues. The adolescent TOP assesses mania, poor school functioning, social conflict, and substance abuse. And they both assess attention problems, conduct problems, depression, psychosis, sleep problems, suicidality, violence, and worrisome sexual behavior. So finally, why your participation in using the TOP is important. So filling out the top provides current well-being information on strengths and challenges, particularly information that highlights progress over time. So the nice thing about the top is because you can continue to send out the form to raters and fill it out yourself, we're able to track little changes in a child's progress over time. Filling out the top helps to guide treatment and placement decisions, and it supports your recommendations to team members, courts, and other providers. It gives youth a stronger voice and supports them in taking more control over their behaviors and decisions. And finally, using the top prompts discussion amongst the team and enhances decision-making. So I'm going to move right into the wellness check demonstration and training, unless anybody has any questions before I begin that. Good, okay. So this is the wellness check screen. So when you first log into wellness check, this is what will come up. I will mention first, this is a demo dashboard. So all of these clients you see here have been created for the purposes of this training. Nobody's real, all of their information has been made up. However, I did create them to simulate what a dashboard would look like for kids in care. So I'll begin with the menu on the top here. This main menu has clients, that's what we're viewing right now, the client dashboard. History, this shows history and recent activity for all the clients on your dashboard. The supervisor tab is particular to supervisors, so if there are any supervisors in the room, I'll go into more detail at the end of the training about what the supervisor functions look like. Under account, you're able to edit profile, change your password, and log out. There's also a button to log out here. And then finally, the help button. You'll always see at the top of your wellness check dashboard new features in the most recent release. So this is anything that's been changed to wellness check, and so it's always a good idea to take a peek here just to make sure that nothing is looking different than the last time. Usually these updates come directly from client feedback. So down here you can see the client dashboard. This shows all of your active clients. This will always come up on your wellness check home screen. And so if you hover over any link here, it provides helpful information about what that button does. So if you were to click on the name of a client, it would bring you to the Edit Client screen. If we move over here to the Raters column and you hover over Manage, this is where you can add raters, email forms, print forms, and show client history. Here under the Reports column, if you view reports, it allows you to view reports for a client. This includes the client report and the Multirater Report, and I'll show you examples of those in a little bit. This status column lists the placement status of a kid in care. This column here is just limited to in-home or out-of-home. There's also an option to make a client inactive when you're editing a client, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. This next deadline column allows you to add a deadline for the next time the top will be taken for a client. So this could be a permanency planning meeting, it could be a discharge planning meeting. Really, however your agency protocol dictates, you can put in a new deadline. The internal ID column is a unique identifier, so it distinguishes each of the clients. So this could be a SACWIS ID, a case ID. Some of our folks use electronic medical records numbers. It really, again, depends on how your agency and your department would like to use this number. The most important thing is that it's different for every client. Finally, in the Move column here, this is how you transfer a client or share a client with another caseworker. And in the Drop column, This is how you remove a client from your caseload. So first I'll start with showing you how to edit a client just so that you can see the information that is gathered. So if we go into Edit Client here, you can see you're able to change name, last name, date of birth. So if anything was entered incorrectly, this is where you could change it. This is the internal ID that I just mentioned. For preferred language, right now it's just English. However, we're working on adding Spanish so that a rater or a client is able to take the top online in a Spanish version. However, there's always the option to print a Spanish form. The status, you'll see, is in-home, out-of-home, or inactive. We have service date opened, gender, where our options are female, male, transgender, and non-binary. And finally, assessment type. Now, the assessment type is automatically populated based on the date of birth. However, you're always able to change or override the assessment type based on your own judgment of the child's development or maturity level. So now I'm going to show you how to add a client. So I'll draw your attention down here to the Add a Client button. When I click on that, it brings me to the Add Client screen. Now there are a few ways that you're able to add a client. First, I'll show you this list down here. So this shows all clients in the system for your department. So for example, if you have a new case that's opened, but you know that the family has had previous child welfare involvement, it's a good idea to just search here or scroll through and look for that child, because it's very possible that they could be in the system already. I know that Wake has been using the top for a couple of years, and so any kids who are coming back into care are likely probably already in the system. So you can either search by name or internal ID. And then you would simply click on the Add button to add them back to your caseload. We can also create a new client. So I'll show you how to do that now. Click on the New Client button. So we're going to create Dominique. To enter the birth date, start with year, and then month, and then date. For internal ID, I'm just going to make up a number today. If your client has if the child has an email address, you can certainly put that in if they're responsible for their own email, or you can leave it blank if they don't. We have preferred language. Dominique's status will be out of home, but I just want to show you, if I have it on out of home, it says date removed from home. But if I change this to in home, it'll say service date opened. So I'll change it to out of home. And my understanding is that from our last webinar that Wake you all will be using the top primarily for kids in out of home care. So that might not even be a status that you ever have to change. But just in case, I'll show you what that looks like. So we'll say that she was removed from home today. And then you'll notice that the assessment type was automatically selected as adolescent based on her birth date. So I'll click Submit to add Dominique to my caseload. And you'll see there she is. Another thing I want to mention about the client dashboard is that all of these columns, or most of the columns, are sortable. So I can sort by name, I can sort by status, next deadline, and internal ID. Next, I'm going to show you just a little demonstration of what it might look like to add a client who's already in the system which absolutely could happen, which is why I mentioned always good to search to see if the client's already there. So if I were to create a new client, this client, Hannah, is already on my caseload. And if I put in her internal ID, put in today's date. If I hit submit, you'll get an error message on the top that says duplicate internal ID found. Please enter a new internal ID. So that's a good indication that that client is probably already in the system. So what I would do in that case is enter that internal ID back in the search bar here. I would enter that internal ID. We'll do that right here, 48. And you can see there she is. Now it says that she's already added because she is on my caseload. However, if this is a client that hadn't been taking the top in the system for quite a while, it'll probably show that she's inactive or unassigned, and then you could add her to your caseload. So now I'm going to go back and show you how to manage raters for Dominique. So I'll click on this Manage button under the raters column and next to her name. And this brings up the rater dashboard. Now you'll notice the raters who are here now are myself, the public agency worker of record in this case, and the client herself. Now you'll notice there's not an option to add a rater yet. That's because for the first administration, the required top forms here, CR, CM, and CS, are checked for you, and you have to take them before you are able to add a rater. So in the raters dashboard, we have the name of the rater, the relationship, their email if you've put that in, and then the different top forms. So this is what I mentioned earlier before we got started with wellness check. There's the consumer registration form, the case mix form, and the clinical scales. There's also an option for a trauma scale and a substance abuse scale. So I'll show you what taking a top actually looks like for Dominique. So as you can see, again, they're automatically checked next to my name, indicating that I have to take them before I can send them out to another rater. So I'll click on the Take Now button. It brings you to this page, and so I'll click Start. And this is the beginning of the consumer registration form, or the CR. So these 12 questions ask about demographic information. So what you'll notice here is that you can select multiple options. Or what is the client's current living situation? Again, you can select multiple options if they apply. I think we said Dominique is in out-of-home care. It asks about current marital status, sexual orientation, employment status, years of education or highest degree the client has earned, approximate family income, religion. It asks about how many times the client has been hospitalized for mental health or substance abuse problems, how many different therapists the client has seen for psychological concerns, how many cigarettes the client usually smokes in a day, and finally, we just added this one, does the client vape or use e-cigarettes? Now, of course, if you don't know this information or feel uncomfortable filling out the information, you can certainly leave any of these questions blank. However, the more information that's filled in, the more well-rounded the reports will be. Now, when I hit submit, It will prompt me that I've left 10 questions unanswered. I can click OK if that was intentional, or I can click Cancel, and it'll highlight which questions have been left unanswered. Next, it asks if the client's participation in this assessment and treatment is voluntary. I will say yes. However, you can select no, and it'll still allow you to continue on with the assessment. Next is the case mix form. So again, this is the form that's completed once on intake and registration, and then again every 90 days. So you'll see this page here asks about life stressors. So whether the client has experienced any of these life stressors in the last 30 days, in the last 12 months, and then the degree to which these stressors are impacting the client's life. So I'll scroll through slowly here and just let you see what some of these questions look like. And I'll fill some of them out so that you can see what it looks like on the client report. So you can see we ask about serious illness or injury, serious problems, school problems, money problems or housing problems, problems getting health care, or legal or criminal issues of any kind. And then finally, any other bad events not listed in a category above, and any daily hassles and problems with daily hassles and responsibilities. So then I'll click Next, and it brings me to this page about any medical issues or illnesses that have been affecting the client's health now or within the past 12 months. So you can see we have a list of common problems here. We'll say Dominique has allergies and asthma. But here's our list, and then there's always an option for other. And then next it asks about, in general, how the client's health is. So this first question, in general, would you say the client's health is? Our options are excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor. How many times has the client seen a physician for medical reasons in the past 2 months? And finally, how many prescription medications is the client currently taking? Now, I will note that this question is asking for any medications, so including those for any medical, like physical health concerns. And I say that because on this next page here, we ask specifically about medications the client is taking for stress, mood, or other psychological or substance abuse issues. And then you'll see if I begin to type something, it'll suggest a gentle suggestion of what I'm trying to type in. So you can put in quantity per dose, units of dose, and doses per day. If the child or adolescent is taking more than one medication, you click this Add Medication button, and it'll add another row. You can add as many as you want, and then just delete if it was selected by accident. And then I'll go ahead and click Next here. And then this page asks about opioid use disorder and medication-assisted treatment. So this first question, is the client receiving medication-assisted treatment for an opioid use disorder? Yes or no? Which medication does he or she take? And then how does he or she take this medication? And then finally, we come to the clinical scales form. So this is the CS form. This is the one that you will be interacting with most often, And this is the form that you will send out to different raters for the child or adolescent. So it asks you to indicate how much of the time during the past 2 weeks the client has, and then it lists all of these questions. Again, for child, that's 48 items, and for adolescent, it's 58 items. And so I will fill out some of these here for Dominique, just so that I can show you what a client report looks like and how it's generated immediately. So while I'm doing that, please go through and read some of the questions as I'm scrolling. But you can see they're grouped by the domains. So we've got questions about eating issues, some assertiveness or conflict questions. It asks about trouble falling asleep and nightmares. And then we move on to conflict at school, school functioning, other social conflict. And then we get into some pretty serious questions about whether or not the client has physically hurt someone else or an animal, or had desires to seriously hurt someone. We ask questions about a client's level of attention and focus. And then we get into some conduct problems. And then questions about depression, so felt down or depressed, had little or no interest, felt restless or worthless, and now, of course, any question that you or the client feel uncomfortable answering, you can absolutely skip these questions. However, these are the questions that directly impact the domain scores, so I'll show you that on the client report. And if not enough information has been filled out for a particular domain, the system won't be able to generate a domain score. So I'll scroll down just to get to the end here, and we'll skip a couple questions. You see, we also, on the adolescent report, we ask questions about substance abuse, and then whether or not substance abuse has interfered with school or work or other responsibilities. And then finally, we ask about some worrisome sexual behavior. So I'll click submit, and again, it prompts me that I've left questions unanswered. And then it brings me to the final screen, indicating that the questionnaire has been completed.
Liza?
Now, yeah.
Hi. I was talking with Jennifer. She says a lot of the kids that self-disclose when we're asking about substance abuse or substance use.
Mm-hmm. More than we would expect.
More than we would expect. So that lends credence to the work that the social workers are doing, that the adolescents, younger folks, feel comfortable enough to disclose that to them. So that's really important in terms of looking at wellness and helping us to get those services that they need.
So you'll see it says questionnaire completed. I have the option to click to return. That's because I'm logged in under a supervisor or a caseworker account. If you had sent this out to a rater, there would be no option to click to return. It would just prompt them to close the browser. So there's no way that they'd be able to go back and look at anything in the dashboard. So I'll click to return, and it brings me back to my client dashboard. Now I'll go back into Dominique's Manage Raters dashboard here. So you'll see now I have the option to add a rater. There's also the option to email the forms, print the forms as a PDF, and that's in English or Spanish. So first I'll show you how to add a rater. I'll click this button right here, and it brings me to the Add a Rater dashboard. So there's two options. I can either create a new rater entirely, or I can look at this list of raters that have been added by either myself or other folks in the department. This is especially nice if, so for example, with a guardian ad litem who has multiple clients on their caseload, they're probably already in the system. You can look for them by searching them or by scrolling through. And then that way you don't have to enter their information again, assuming it is the same person. But I'll go ahead and add a new rater just to show you what that looks like. So we're going to add a foster parent. Again, we have the same options for gender. It allows you to select state and then relationship. So you can see we've got collaborative or community worker, guardian ad litem, guidance counselor, parent, placement family non-relative, private agency worker of record, probation officer, public agency resource worker, teacher, therapist, relative, and other. So this will be her placement family non-relative. I'll put in an email for Morgan, because then I'll show you what the email looks like when you send a top to a rater. You have the option of putting in a phone number. This question about participating, the options are yes, refuses, or unable, no longer involved, or other. The reason we ask this is because these things are certainly, it's possible that they could change. So a rater who's initially participating might not be in the future, or vice versa. And so it's just a good way of tracking that data. So then I'll go ahead and hit submit here. So you'll see that Morgan was added as one of the raters for Dominique. It lists her relationship to Dominique and the email. For this training, I'll show you what it looks like to send a form to a rater. So I'll select the CS next to Morgan, since the CM and the CR have already been filled out. And I'll click email forms here. So what we did before was take now, which brought it up directly on my screen. If I click email forms, you get a confirmation that the form has been emailed to that rater's email address. Fingers crossed that this shows up in my wellness check email. Yep, and there it did. So it says, your ideas and observations for Dominique are essential. Please complete the top assessment as soon as possible. Whether this is for you or someone you know, your answers to these questions will make a big difference. Thank you. And then there's a link to take the questionnaire. And so this will bring them directly to the beginning of the questionnaire, and then it'll prompt them to close their browser when they're finished. You can also print forms, and I'll show you what the PDF looks like. So this is the PDF of the CS that we just took electronically. This one up here says demo, but I will note that the PDF is unique to the client and to the rater. So this number down here and this barcode will be different every time you click print. And the reason for that is because when this is filled out and faxed back to outcome referrals, we have live folks here verifying the information in the system, so that and entering the information to make sure that a client report is generated. And so that's why it's linked specifically to the client and to the rater. So it's just 2 pages. You can print it out, fill it out, and fax it back in. and a client report will be generated usually within 10 to 15 minutes during normal business hours. All right. All right, so we went over adding a rater and taking the top for the raters. Oh, so now I want to show you the client report. So first I'll show you what the report for Dominique looks like. I kind of selected buttons at random a little bit, so this will be a surprise for all of us. But so if I click on View Reports, it'll bring me to this report viewer screen. It shows the date of all the reports. So because we created her and only took one top, there's only one client report. So it shows the date. It shows the type of assessment that was taken, whether that's adolescent or child. And then the status of the report. 9 times out of 10, this will say okay. It'll say processing if you've gone back into the screen too soon, like within a couple seconds, it'll still say processing. Just refresh the page and it'll change to okay. But then if you were to print out a form and fax it back in, it'll say processing for about 10 or 15 minutes until the folks on our end have verified the information. So I'll click on this date here. And it shows me the client report for Dominique. So there are normally 2 pages on the Outcome Referrals client report. The first page of the top report contains basic information. So your client's medical history, including any hospitalizations, prescription medications, endorsed hallmark or stressful events. And then this hallmark symptoms endorsed piece here, this is based on the responses on the clinical scales, on the CS. It's not meant as a diagnosis, but rather as a suggestion for further clinical investigation. So you can see, based on Dominique's responses, we might suggest investigating for major depressive disorder, however, or major depressive episode. However, that's not meant as a formal diagnosis. We also talk about medical issues and then the stressful events that were endorsed on the case mix form. And then here is what a client report looks like the first time you've taken the top. So the second page shows you the prevalence and severity of patient problems in the different clinical domains. For children, or actually this is an adolescent form, so this is ADHD or attention problems, conduct disorder, depression, manic or mania, psychosis, substance abuse, social conflict, worrisome sexual behavior, sleep, suicidality, violence, and work or school functioning. The numbers on the side of the graph demonstrate the number of standard deviations above normal, which is this 0 line right here, as compared to the general population. Higher numbers indicate problems, whereas negative numbers down here, such as with violence, indicate strength. Now, there's only one bar because we've only taken one top for Dominique. I'll show you what follow-ups look like in a second. But then you'll see that we also show you the critical items that have been marked as occurring during the past 2 weeks. So these are the items that definitely require further investigation. So inflicted pain on yourself, you know, we obviously want you to investigate any issues of self-harm. So, oh, and then the last thing I want to show you is these, the color coding right here indicates severity. So yellow indicates mild, orange is moderate, and red is severe. So I'll go back and show you perhaps kind of a more well-rounded client report for somebody who has multiple follow-ups. So we're going to take a look at Henry. Even though Henry is a fictional client, still always good to get some background information on our fictional client. So you can see Henry's male. He's in out-of-home care. He was removed on September 1st, and he's an adolescent. So I'll click on View Reports here, and you'll see that multiple top reports have been generated for Henry. So if I click on this most recent one, it'll show you it's the Adolescent Report taken on October 9th. Again, it shows the demographic information at the top, hallmark symptoms endorsed, health issues and stressful events. And then here's what I really want to show you, which is the outcome graph. So this shows you for a particular client and for a particular rater. So in this case, this is Henry's self-report because he's an adolescent. It shows you the different top reports that have been taken and the corresponding bar graph showing change over time. So you'll see for conduct disorder, for example, when Henry first came in, his conduct scores were pretty high. He was in the severe range at 7, and this continued to go down. He's fluctuated a little bit, but he's certainly making progress. Same for substance abuse, continues to decrease. And then if we look over here at suicide, now what we recommend is that anytime a client rates themselves in any range above normal on the suicide scale, please investigate that. Because what we find is that a client will often self-disclose suicidal thoughts or behaviors on a written form far more than they will just in a conversation with someone. So if a client is disclosing that they have thoughts or feelings of suicide, definitely important to follow up with them about that. So I'll go back and show you this button down here that says Multirater Report. And it gives a nice kind of overview explanation of what that report is going to explain. So it's the ratings of different people who have completed top well-being assessments for a specific client. In addition to showing multiple perspectives, it provides an overall view of the client's challenges and strengths. So we'll click on the Multirater Report. And it gives you this very colorful report here. I'll scroll down to the bottom just to show you what these different symbols mean for this client. So down here is the key, if you will. We'll see the clients, the circle, probation officers, this little yellow triangle, public worker, caseworkers, the square. So now I'll scroll back up. So this will be the most recent report for each rater for a given date range. So you'll notice that there are some domains where everybody seems to agree: psychosis, mania, worrisome sexual behavior. But there are also some domains where there's significant disagreement. So for example, conduct problems and substance abuse, the client is rating himself as kind of in the mild or moderate range on both of those things, whereas the caseworker is seeing that as a much bigger issue. And so that would be a really good point of discussion with the client or with the group about maybe what those things mean to the client, how they think the child or adolescent, how they think they're impacting their life. And something that we find a lot is that for suicidality, that's where the client might be rating themselves as a little bit more severe than any other rater, and that's probably because they haven't disclosed that to anyone else, but they're disclosing it on the top. And so when you see that, definitely make contact and make sure everything's okay, or create a safety plan, whatever your protocol dictates. And same can be said for violence or conduct problems or substance abuse. And then this incomplete battery column over here, that's what I was mentioning a little bit before about skipping questions. So if you or a rater skips questions, on the clinical scales for a particular domain and there weren't enough questions answered to generate a score, then that symbol will be under incomplete battery, indicating that there just wasn't enough information to generate a score. So there's just a few more things that I want to go over, and I'm looking at the clock here. I want to be respectful of everybody's time and leave room for questions at the end too. So we viewed reports. Now I'll show you what moving or transferring a client looks like. So we'll take Emily here. If I click on the move button, again, this is how you transfer a client or share a client with another caseworker. I'll click on move. You can see these are other caseworkers that are listed in my demo department. So if I wanted to transfer Emily, I can, transfer means that the client is dropped from my current dashboard and added to another caseworker. So I would click that transfer button there. Or I could share, and that's when the client is added to a new caseworker and both caseworkers remain active in care. That's this button here. Now, what's important to know about the share function is that that means that you're sharing all of the information, including client reports, raters, all that good stuff. And then I'll go back here and show you drop clients. So again, to drop a client, it removes the client from your caseload, but they must be in another worker's list first. So this drop function really just means dropping them from your caseload. If, however, you wanted to remove a client from all caseloads, that's when you inactivate a client. So I'll show you how to do that. We'll click on Emily's name to bring up the Edit Client page. And that's where I'll change her status to inactive. If I click Submit, it says she's updated. You'll notice she's no longer on my client dashboard. However, she's not gone permanently. She doesn't disappear. There's Emily here listed as inactive. If I wanted to add her back to my caseload, maybe the case is closed, it's reopened, so we're involved in her family again. I'll click on her name, change her status, click Submit, go back to Add a Client, and then you'll see here's Emily again, and I have the option to add her back to my caseload because she's not listed as inactive. So I'll click Add. And there she is, yep, right at the top. And then lastly, I'll just show you a couple of the functions up in this top menu bar here. So history, if I click on history here, it shows you recent history for all of the clients on your caseload. So you can select any of the functions that you're looking to see. So add a rater, we'll look at new client, we'll look at viewing the Multirater report. So if I click refresh, what this shows me is pretty much all of the actions within your dashboard. So you can see we viewed the Multirater report for Henry just, 10 or so minutes ago. You can see that I created a new client, viewed other Multirater reports. So this is a really nice way to be able to look at, if you're having trouble remembering, oh, I thought I added a rater for that particular client, but it's not showing up or something, you can go back in here, make sure you didn't add it for a different client or see if the action was completed. You can also sort by client, by internal ID, rater, and by action, or description and type. And then lastly, if there are supervisors in the room, I'll just show you what a supervisor account allows you to do. So if I click on the supervisor button up here, this shows me any of the workers who are under my supervision. So you can see the name of the different caseworkers. It lists that I am their supervisor. It shows their role. And then if you needed to drop them from your supervision, you could click the drop button, and then it's not getting rid of their account. Another supervisor can pick them up and add them to their supervision. But you know, of course, if somebody is changing which department or supervisor they're under, this is a nice way to easily do that. You can also add a new worker here by clicking the Add Worker button. So I think that actually brings me to the end of the training. Here's my contact information. This is me up here. Feel free to call me or send me an email. This is also our customer service number. Again, email and phone number. So if you run into any technical issues that you have a question about, feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you all. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.